I'm panicking on these 5 players for fantasy football right now. Hit that like and subscribe button if you like fantasy football. Here on the 4for4 YouTube channel, we are on our way to 1,000 subscribers. I'm going to be answering every start-sit question this season, so hit that subscribe button if you want some help winning your fantasy football league. Starting off with player number 1 that I'm panicking on just a little bit is going to be Puka Nacua for the Rams. And when we're talking specifically about Puka Nacua, it's not necessarily having to do with Puka Nacua is the reason that I am panicking, that I am worried. It has to stem back to this Matthew Stafford injury. And if we look at kind of his interview that he had a little bit earlier this week when it came on Thursday of last week, Matthew Stafford kind of just gave an 8-word answer, kind of talking about the vagueness of this injury, essentially saying he's day-to-day, that he is getting back to health, and kind of the same unusual measures that they're hearing about how Matthew Stafford's, potentially getting ready for the season. I understand he said the good thing is that he feels pretty good. He said that the last couple days out there practicing, he was able to do even more than he thought, and that he was going to be able to do from the first day, that he's trying to stack those days. Like we said, backs are sometimes very interesting things. It's not cut and dry what and how you're going to feel is kind of what he said. So for me, when we look at Puka Nacua's ultimate level of fantasy football ceiling is tied directly to Matthew Stafford. Now, having Jimmy Garoppolo as the backup quarterback, having Sean McVay, there's a little bit of excitement that we do have knowing that even if Matthew Stafford's not out there, like Sean McVay can kind of make magic, can make lemons turn into lemonade. Puka Nacua sliding in as wide receiver 6. Overall player 11. So you have to draft him in the back half of the first round. And so for me, that's kind of where the panic's starting to happening. This is like a high intent pick where, like we said, you can't have your first round pick bust. I don't want Puka Nacua to play bad because we've seen wide receiver 6 in his rookie level season on a points per game basis, wide receiver 2 in his second season. Puka Nacua could be that guy that finishes as a top, 3, top 4 points per game scorer, and you're absolutely loving the value. And I know part of the reason that his overall value has kind of gone down mainly has to do with the fact of this Matthew Stafford injury. So I know it's tied directly into it. Puka Nacua is not hurt, but how long can Matthew Stafford, one bad shot, one sack where Matthew Stafford gets rolled up on, and all of a sudden we could be looking at Puka Nacua's fantasy football value just going down that ultimate level ceiling, going a little bit lower. So if I'm having to panic on somebody right now, I would say I am panicking on Puka Nacua, especially in the first round. Like we said, we want that first round pick to absolutely hit. I'm definitely panicking on Puka Nacua heading into the early part of 2025. The second player that I'm panicking on as we head into the 2025 fantasy football season and as we're kind of in that draft season, it is going to be Joe Mixon for the Houston Texans. And Joe Mixon right now on the 4for4 site composite ADP. And like I said, if you want to be using all of these amazing tools, all this amazing research, all the amazing rankings that come from John Paulson, use code YouTube, gets you actually 25% off of a 4for4 plan. Definitely want to check that out to help you win a fantasy football championship in 2025. But right now, Joe Mixon is coming off the board as RB30, overall player 86. So you're not having to put a huge investment into Joe Mixon. But let's kind of dive into what happened with Joe Mixon, because I think a lot of people that are kind of coming back into the fray, coming back into the fantasy football world, don't really know. And the truth is, the Houston Texans really don't know. The short answer is that Joe Mixon suffered a non-football related injury during the offseason, which has kept him sidelined for all of these team preparations. So, like we said, we can kind of look back and kind of what's the latest data, what is the latest, info coming from beat reporters from the Houston Texans. Like I said, this injury continues to remain private. The injury is confirmed to be in the ankle region. Like we said, this is kind of Nick, their GM essentially addressed the awkward situation and said, this is awkward for the franchise. He said, there's been no change. Joe's just kind of working through it. He's still on the NFI list. So, like I said, this is going to be a case-by-case basis with how they get him closer and what week one should look like. And kind of in the absence of Joe Mixon, we've seen Nick Chubb, We've seen Woody Marks. We've seen Damian Pierce kind of be handling the load this preseason. Now, I don't think any of those guys kind of stem to be absolute league-winning running backs. And we kind of know what Joe Mixon was last season. Like, Joe Mixon was a dude that helped you win some of your fantasy football matchups. But Joe Mixon, kind of as we're going, is somebody that I'm panicking on because even an RB30 price tag, like, yes, there is upside if maybe Joe Mixon returns, week 3, week 4. But even if he's battling this injury and there's not a lot about it, like, is he going to be back to full strength? And the second piece of this is Joe Mixon is not a young buck. He is 29.1 years old. Even coming off of an RB9 overall finish last season with 17.2 fantasy points per game in full PPR, I still am panicking on Joe Mixon. I'm still worried about Joe Mixon. Let's not forget that they got rid of Laremy Tunsil. This offensive line just seems to be a bottom half offensive line in the NFL. Joe Mixon's a guy I'm panicking on. So definitely be taking a breather on Joe Mixon as we head into 2025 fantasy football. My third player I'm panicking on in fantasy football as we kind of head into this overall 2025 draft season, it's going to be Breece Hall for the New York Jets. And right now, if you look on the 4for4 site, composite ADP saw it lighting in as RB15, overall player 39. And Breece Hall was kind of the prince that was promised a few years ago. We saw this amazing rookie level season. He only played in 7 games, but put up 16.4 fantasy points per game before tearing his ACL. And then in 2023, everyone was expecting him to kind of return to that top 3 or top 5 type form that we were seeing. 17.1 fantasy points in 17 games. Sounds absolutely great. Everyone is sky's the limit for Breece Hall heading into year 3. Well, in year 3, we see this New York Jets overall offense absolutely stink with Aaron Rodgers. We thought it was going to boost up Breece Hall. We thought it was going to boost up Garrett Wilson, and it didn't do either of those things. And we see Breece Hall put up a 15.1 fantasy points per game season, which put him as the RB17 on a fantasy points per game basis. What we did not see last year, kind of the big difference between that 2023 campaign and that 2024 campaign, mainly came down to the receptions that he got. He had 76 receptions in 2023, only 57 receptions in 2024. But you're going to say to me, well, Caleb, new things are together for this Jets offense. We got Justin Fields in the fold. We got Aaron Glenn as the head coach, bringing along some of that staff from the Detroit Lions. We got an absolutely fabulous offensive line. And I would agree with all of that. My biggest piece of worry, number one, is Justin Fields actually an upgrade over Aaron Rodgers? I would say it's probably about the same at best. Like, absolute, best case scenario, it's maybe a little bit better. Now, Justin Fields does check the ball down to his running backs, but now the issue with Breece Hall is they brought in a coach who had seen an absolutely fabulous running back by committee system between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Now, while if I could say Breece Hall is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs and put into that role and he's going to turn into Jahmyr Gibbs and be a top 5 running back, I wish I could. But I don't know that, and neither do you. And so the fact of the matter is that you got Breece Hall, you got Isaiah Davis, and you got Braylon Allen. And Braylon Allen has looked absolutely amazing during this preseason season. So I still assume Breece Hall is going to get the majority of the run. I assume he's probably going to get somewhere around 210 rushing attempts. He's probably going to average 4.4 yards per carry. But the worry is he going to have the receptions, or are those receptions going to start to go to maybe an Isaiah Davis? Or is Braylon Allen going to take more percentages of the work? Because if we look at last year, overall snap share, Breece Hall, even though he put up this RB17 overall points per game finish, he was RB8 on a snap share. He played 72.3% of the snaps. We didn't see Braylon Allen, even though Braylon Allen was somebody that we were picking up off the waiver wire, like, get into the game as much as we were actually hoping for. So I guess my worry with Breece Hall is that this offense just isn't going to be able to support him to the level that we need, and that the kind of late 3rd, early 4th round pick that you have to take him in your redraft leagues is just still just a little bit too rich when you're considering that a few picks before that, you're seeing guys like a Chase Brown go off the board. You're seeing, James Cook in the same range, like Kyron Williams a little bit further. Like, I just, from a running back perspective, I would much prefer those guys, even like an Amarian Hampton, who we know is in this Jim Harbaugh type style offense. I would prefer any of those guys over Breece Hall right now. And yes, I am definitely panicking on Breece Hall. My next player I'm panicking on in fantasy football, it's on the same team. It's going to be on Garrett Wilson, who you guys see the jersey behind me. I am a huge Garrett Wilson believer. I'm a huge Garrett Wilson truther. But I think as you start to realize, we're starting to see Garrett Wilson's, ADP slide a little bit. Wide receiver 15, overall player 33. Last year was his best season for fantasy football, and he only put up a wide receiver 18 points per game number with 14.8. The year before that, 12.5, and the year before that, 12.7. Now, Aaron Rodgers, first full season. We see Devontae Adams get traded halfway through the season. Garrett Wilson was looking like he probably might have finished as a top 15, top 13 type wide receiver without Devontae Adams, and then we kind of saw that slow off a little bit. Now, why everybody and why I love Garrett Wilson is because he's a major target hog. When we look, his rookie season, 147 targets, 168 his sophomore season, 153 last season, and he's been pretty consistently healthy, playing 17 games in all 3 of those seasons. Now, the biggest piece of this is, last season had the most receiving touchdowns with 7. He's gotten over 1,000 yards, close to that 100 reception mark. The biggest issue just continues to be why, if you're getting 168 targets, you only have 95 catches? Why, if you get 153 targets, are you only getting 101 catches? Like, that to me, as somebody that has been Garrett Wilson's kind of pushing him up, he's been a top 5 target earner over the last 2 seasons. Where is the kind of disconnect from a fantasy football perspective when a guy who's that active, who honestly, I think if anybody, he passes the eye test. Like, you watch him and you're like, man, I'm not saying he's Justin Jefferson, but I'm saying he's definitely like close. Like, he's in the realm of should be a top 8 wide receiver in real life. But in the sense of where is this efficiency overall coming from? Because he's got the target separation, he's got the juke rate, he's got the explosive, rating. I think the biggest thing when we look at him has just been that overall efficiency that he's getting from when it comes to the target accuracy. Like last year, he was wide receiver 36 on target accuracy. And so I'm just starting to kind of push the brakes as we kind of start to hear more and more out of these, not only training camps, but just thinking about it a little bit more logically. Like I said, I feel like a lot of times I'm over here, you see the jerseys behind me. I want Garrett Wilson to succeed. I have him on a ton of my dynasty teams. I'll have him on a ton of my redraft teams, but I'm panicking. I am panicking, ladies and gentlemen, and I think you should too. My last and final player that I am panicking on for fantasy football, it is going to be Chris Godwin for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And main thing with Chris Godwin is just continuing to be the fact that we see Emeka absolutely stepping up at camp, turning into what we would think is an absolutely great draft pick. Great words coming from not only Teddy Bridgewater after he arrived, from Baker Mayfield, but Chris Godwin right now, there's a chance, but that he kind of stays on PUP. But even there's a little bit of a chance that and a rumor that, according to reports from Bucs reporters from 2 days ago, that they might activate him off the PUP, but he might not play. So even if he starts the season out on IR, both of these guys have been having some football movements, so we're starting to see that. But I think as we kind of approach the season, with a guy like a Chris Godwin who has been this injured over the last few seasons, I imagine they try to bring him back slowly, especially if they believe that Emeka is that guy. Now, we saw Jalen McMillan go down with a pretty serious injury where he's going to be out until about week 10. So right now it's the Mike Evans, it's the Emeka show. Wide receiver 60 is probably a decent level shot that you could argue about taking on Chris Godwin, but that's assuming that we're hoping that he's back by like week 3 or week 4. If this is one of these injuries where we're talking week 5, week 6, where's Chris Godwin? Like, I just think in the similar range of players, especially at the end of your draft, there's a little bit better opportunity, because even though I'm saying he's wide receiver 60, overall player 154, like a lot of your league mates might draft him a little bit higher just because once you kind of get into that 8th, 9th round range, Chris Godwin's probably going to be looked at maybe 10th round. I'm panicking on him. And so if you drafted him, in any of your best ball type formats early on, I'm definitely not feeling super comfortable. And as we kind of head into draft weekends over the next 2 weekends, I'm definitely kind of taking a pause and saying, I'm starting to freak out a little bit about Chris Godwin. But like I said, guys, if you like fantasy football, hit that like and subscribe button, as we are on the way to 1,000 subscribers. We're answering everybody's start-sit question this season, so make sure you drop a comment. Let me know what you think of these players, if you're panicking on any of these players, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.